Hi, this is State Representative Tom Calter, and thank you for joining us on this next episode of Issues of the Day. Today I'm really fortunate to have an old friend and special person join me. Christopher Hart from Nathan Hale Foundation is the president and the founder of that organization. And first of all, Chris, before we begin, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, it's my honor as well. Folks, I met Chris 10 years ago. And Chris had this vision for beginning a outreach program for veterans. And I remember the discussion well. It was in Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts, the day before Thanksgiving.
Yes, and we talked at length. And Chris made me aware of something that I should have been aware of because I come from a family of Army officers. He talked a lot about what it's like to leave your home at a young age, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, for a 4-year commitment to the military. Just leaving home is traumatic enough for a young man or young woman. But then to go to boot camp and be taught a way of life and to be trained to fight. And in that way of life, it's a command and control environment, not very similar to today's management style of most progressive companies. It's one where your day is planned for you, your nights are planned for you, your schedule is planned for you. It's one where you're trained in weapons to defend your country, and unfortunately at times that means real violence. You're trained to think unilaterally and to accept the demands of authority. You're in isolation, but while you're there, no matter what you need, whether it's counseling, support, any type of information, it's right there. It's contained in a base. It's contained in a camp. And now you go off for 4 years, and I still remember you talking about this. It was a snowy November day, the night before Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden you fulfill your responsibilities, you meet your obligations, you represent people back home and you serve your country, and then you come home. And on a Tuesday, you may be in the desert in Afghanistan. And on a Thursday, you could be in civilian clothes, out of the Army and everything you know, trying to find your way in a new way of life. Not really knowing where to go to find a job, not knowing what to do when nobody's telling you what to do, not having a command and control environment where all decisions are made for you. And now all of a sudden, you've got to make this major transformation into civilian life. It was interesting to me at the time, remains interesting to me now, that we spend, 6 months in boot camp? Is it about 6 months?
3 months.
3 months in boot camp, but we don't, getting ready for the military, getting ready for the armed forces, but this country doesn't invest a day in reintegration back into our society. We drop our soldiers on the ground, back here in America, back home, but it's not the same home they left.
Right.
And they need help. They need services. And I can remember that November day when you told me about the plight of our soldiers, how they couldn't even find transportation to a doctor's appointment or a job interview.
Right.
So I'd like to begin the interview there, Chris. What led you to that day in November where you dreamt up this vision for the Nathan Hale Foundation? What caused you to put your life and your talents and your time, and I know firsthand your money, into creating Nathan Hale Foundation?
Well, I mean, most of all, 9/11 had a lot to do with it. I left at the anniversary date of my grandfather being killed in the war, which was Thanksgiving Day, 1944. So I had turned 40 right after 9/11, and I had to be useful. I had to take my talents and my passion and my heritage and my family, being a Revolutionary War family. You have to be useful to your country, especially in a country's time of need. But I didn't want to waste my time. I didn't want to waste the veterans' time. So I was very particular on making sure I had the right information. This is what they need. So I went to different veterans groups and veterans clubs and asking friends who are veterans and family who are veterans, what is the number one thing that you need when you come home? And transportation was number one. having counseling, someone to talk to when they come home is, number two. The other things weren't, they're just the average things that a lot of veterans, need, food and clothing and activities, things to do. Because we have no base here, Tom, so we don't really have that.
Things that were provided for them
Right.
when they were in the military.
Sure. So like you had stressed, Tom, the things really haven't changed a lot. We're not really, preparing them 3 months in basic training, but the reintegration into civilian life, there's no prep at all. And they're coming home and just go off and try to find your own way now. And it's really not easy. And especially if you have an injury, and especially if you need to talk to somebody. So those are the things that we shot for right away, was transportation for veterans to and from the VA facilities. And when I first started, Tom, it was just Kingston and Plymouth, and then it went to 9 towns, and then it went to a food pantry. Now he serves 75,000 pounds of food a year.
Chris, I've
16
watched
towns.
with great admiration the way Nathan Hale Foundation, under your leadership, has evolved. I remember well when you got your first van. You were driving the truck, you were changing the tires, you were changing the oil, and you were running all around the place. And I may add, oftentimes without even a thank you from some people. But yet you kept coming back. And I can remember when you began to diversify your service offering, where you not only provided transportation, but that you got into the food pantry business and expanded it geographically over to Middleborough,
Right.
And created a very, very successful program. It's amazing to compare the Nathan Hale Foundation of today with that very modest beginning.
Right.
So bring us through the evolution of the 3rd and 4th and 5th year, and then bring us up to the present. This
Sure.
is your story.
Sure.
This interview is with you, not with me. So I'd love to hear
But
you
you
share.
know me, Tom, it's hard for me to talk about myself and put myself up on a pedestal.
Well, I'm going to put you in a corner where you got to do it.
A lot of our success has to do with you, Tom. Without the guidance sometimes, and keeping our funding in there every year, that's crucial. At least once a year, Tom, a veteran tells us, "You saved my husband's life," or "You saved my life," and that. Everyone has had a small role in that,
Chris, I just consider myself a loyal follower of the Nathan Hale Foundation. You inspired me on that Thanksgiving Eve. Every year with the work you do, you confirm that my judgment in terms of supporting the organization, supporting you, was solid. And you've never let any of us down. I know I speak for the former Senate President, Terry Murray. I know I speak for Senator DiMacedo and Representative Muratori, who support me each time I fight for your budget line item, and they co-sponsor it. They speak to it. You've earned everything you have in terms of state funding. You seem to make $10 worth of service for every dollar we get for you.
Sure.
You know how to leverage, and that's because of your passion, your commitment, and your work ethic, and your team. So enough about what we do for you. I want to hear what you do for veterans, because believe it or not, one of the reasons I asked you to come on this show is there may be veterans out there who are listening right now who have real needs, and the need is right down the street with Nathan Hale Foundation,
Sure.
and they may not know about it. So let's use the remainder of our time talking about your services, because I think that's the critical piece that our veterans need right now.
Sure. I mean, transportation is a gigantic thing, and we transport 4 days a week. We go into downtown Boston once a week. We go to Brockton 4 days a week.
Primarily hospitals?
Yep, the VA facilities and the Boston Vet Center.
Great, okay.
We have a lot of vets who are amputees. We have a lot of vets who are blind, and there are some vets that say, "I drive myself," but if you have an injury, you really can't make it in there.
Is there any cost to them for that
Zero
service?
cost.
No cost.
No. If
And
you
how
live in
would-
Duxbury, if you live in Middleborough, if you live in Halifax, if you live in Pembroke, if you live in Marshfield, and we cover 9 towns altogether.
And is that schedule that you go into Boston published so that they can coordinate their doctor's appointments around the schedule? Or do they call you and say you need a ride and you build your schedule around that? How does it work?
We have a structured schedule.
Good.
In the Brockton VA and Boston VA are very familiar with us now. So a lot of times a veteran may go in there and they may not know who the Nathan Hale Foundation is. They may not know that we have 2 Veterans Outreach Centers, but the folks at the Brockton VA system do.
Okay.
And they may suggest to the person, you know, that there is some free transportation services for you. And, you know, if they live in those towns, the counselor can meet them at one of our 2 facilities, you know, that we provide the counseling in.
Is that schedule, that transportation schedule, online?
Yes, yes.
And how would they find you online?
You can go to nathanhalefoundation.org or the Nathan Hale Veterans Outreach Centers, Plymouth, Middleborough.org.
Okay.
And we have 3 Facebook pages. We have the Nathan Hale Veterans Outreach Centers, we have the Nathan Hale Veterans Wellness Centers, and we have the 3 Hearts Farm.
Okay, to those of you who are listening right now, we're going to end the show with the final minute with Chris repeating that contact information. So if you need those services, you know where to reach Chris. So now let's move on past transportation.
So from there we went with counseling, and we, at the beginning when we first started the organization, the country was still in kind of shock from 9/11. The finances of the state were really, really tight, and it was very, very hard at the beginning. You had to make $1 out of 15 cents. If you weren't utilizing other existing services, you were dead in the water. So we got really, really good at being frugal with our money. And especially when you're getting us our money, you know, you have a lot of questions, Tom, which is great. And so by doing that, we used the Boston Vet Center. We used the Boston Food Warehouse. Like Boston Food Warehouse, our bill would be $75,000 a year. Our bill is probably around $2,000.
Really?
Yep, after our grants, and it really doesn't cost us much at all. We pay more in fuel to go into Boston than we pay for our food.
So let's take them one at a time. Go back to counseling for a minute. You've got a person on staff that comes in part-time and provides
from the Boston
counseling.
Vet Center.
And do they, if a vet felt he or she needed some type of counseling or just somebody to speak to, would they call to make an appointment?
Yes, they could call to make an appointment, but we try to keep a lot of that information very private.
Okay.
So when they call the office, the person at the desk will give them the person's name and number for them to call, opposed to putting it online.
Very good.
Readjustment counseling, combat counseling, bereavement counseling. We've done all that, but it's 2016. There's some very case-sensitive things that we just don't really share online anymore.
Now, is there any charge for that service?
That's zero. Yeah.
No charge.
Our food is zero. Our clothing is zero. We have 75 bicycles. We have tandem bikes for our blind people. We have trike bicycles for our people with traumatic brain injuries, with balance issues. And
this is where I'm going to manage you. Let's move on to food.
Okay.
You have a food pantry here.
Yes.
And you have a food, no, do you still have a food pantry in Middleborough?
In Middleborough, yes.
You do. So how often is the pantry open to people for people to come in and get what they need?
4 days a week.
And the hours?
9 to 5.
Okay.
And on Wednesdays, we actually, in Middleborough, we keep that open until 8 o'clock at night for veterans and family members and spouses that work during the day and they really don't have a chance to get there during the weekdays.
Okay. And so what is a veteran able to do when he or she comes into the food pantry?
They can go food shopping. We have fresh meat, dairy, produce, canned goods, and we also have a clothing outlet. They can pick up kids' clothing, women's clothing, men's clothing, and
is there any limitation to quantity or anything?
You know, it all depends, Tom. That's a really good question. We do have some veterans that walk in the door. They had been recently deployed. They're just getting their business together, and they just got a new place, and we'll load up their whole car. You know what I mean? And you know, we make sure that they have more than enough to eat. It shouldn't be a problem.
And how often can a vet visit the food pantry?
I mean, once a week, most people come by. Like on Friday is bakery day, and we have cakes and pies and cheesecake and tiramisu and bread and bagels, and it's also farm day. So after there they go visit our farm, and whatever we do have fresh as far as vegetables, they can also help themselves there.
Now, when they come to the food center and they get food and they get clothing, is there any cost to that?
That's zero.
So still no cost to any veterans who avail themselves of your services. Before we move on, I want to talk about Christmas time, because I've been fortunate enough to have you invite me to your Christmas program where you collect and distribute. I walked into your office not this past Christmas, although I was there this
Thanksgiving.
past Christmas. Thanksgiving, pardon me.
Right.
And what you distribute to people is just off the charts. It's amazing, Chris. Where do you find the donors?
Well, a lot of it comes from the Boston Food Warehouse. And we're very fortunate. We're in between Pine Hills and Duxbury, in Kingston, in Plymouth. We're in Plymouth. They're very giving people here. A lot of people do want to help veterans. So a lot of the great, good stuff that comes in for our Thanksgiving baskets comes in from within the community. We went to 175 Thanksgiving baskets this year, which was, I think, around 18,000 pounds of food.
18,000 pounds
18,000 pounds of food. So they leave with 2 big, huge banana boxes, pardon me, laundry detergent, fabric softener, dishwashing detergent, Pop-Tarts, breakfast goods, pancake syrup, pancake mix, and so they have a whole weekend to spend with their families and don't have to go out anywhere to pick anything up.
How many people do you have on staff, Chris?
It would be 5 paid people and about 50 volunteers doing it.
5 paid people for all of these services.
Yeah, 3 of them are drivers.
That's pretty incredible.
And most of it's volunteers. A lot of it's volunteers. And, when you have veteran services and you have state and federal regulations, you have HIPAA laws, and the people who work with your filing systems and everything have to be checked out and quarried. So you just can't use volunteers for everything. So there are some administrative costs, to running an organization like this if you want to keep it neat.
Now, in the past year and a half, you've made a major investment in the farm.
Right.
I was delighted to visit with you this past summer, and I can't say I'm surprised anymore with what you do, but I was surprised. That day I went down there, you had to have had 50 volunteers working on the farm, putting in gardens, building structures, everybody highly motivated and very enthusiastic and excited about being there. I know you've developed some corporate partnerships with people. Try to help everybody understand not only what you built down there, and not only how you built it down there, but why you built it down there. Why you built a farm for veterans. I think it's a fascinating story.
Well, it's going to be on a couple of levels, different levels. One would be to teach veterans a trade. The greatest Americans and the greatest generations of Americans in this country have come from farmers. And they built a beautiful country for us. And I think veterans, with that, learning computers and learning, those things are all important, but I think we need to go back to basics. And farming is something that you can learn with your family. And that was one of the major reasons. The other major reason, Tom, is traumatic brain injuries. Veterans with traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, there is really not a lot of services available for them here. So to bring the services into a farm, it's kind of like yoga. If you have traumatic brain injury or PTSD, 65% of your day is in a gray area. You're in a bad mood. You're tired. You get quickly agitated with anything that goes around. So when you do things like yoga, farming, boating, walking, hiking, photography, artwork, you're going to relax the brain. When you relax the brain, you stimulate the brain cell stems. When you do that, you can bring back memory. So if you can make up 65% of their day being in a positive way, you can actually snap them out of that being in a rotten mood all the time. And you can actually heal people by doing this. And with the farm, you'll be doing farming, you're pruning. You have the wind going through the trees. You have other people talking to you that are all nice. You're tired of farming, you're going on a walk on the nature trail, which is next to the rivers and the ponds, the ripple of the water going in and out from the banks, and all these things are all repetitious. All those repetitious things help this veteran. So if you say you're a vet, Tom, and I'm not a vet, we both get in the same car accident, we both have a traumatic brain injury, the veteran would heal before the civilian. Reason why is because they went to basic training. They were trained on how to be repetitious. So when the brain is stimulated to go back into that repetitious mode, this is what's going to help the veteran regain his or her memory. And it's also something that no one ever packs up the kids and says, honey, let's go to the VA. It's really not a nice place. It's a great place, and they help a lot of people, but it's really not a great family atmosphere.
Right,
the
right.
farm is a great family atmosphere. So while dad maybe have the veteran, or mom be the veteran, one may be kayaking, the other might maybe taking a sea glass class, and they may bring their kids with them who are working, helping people with, pick the flowers and everything else, but they're healing together as a family. And we thought that was very, very important for them.
What type of reaction have you received from veterans? Are they taking advantage of that opportunity? Is there a steady flow of veterans who want to come down themselves or with their families to volunteer on the farm?
Well, we do have it kind of limited right now because we're still kind of sort of maybe under construction. In the last year, we've had about a full year of doing construction. From within the community, we've raised between material, labor, volunteers, probably $250,000. Restoring a barn, putting in a farm road, building rock walls, all these things take time, and French drains. So on the weekends, you'll have a lot of families that may pop in and out, but until we get our fence going around, it's a little safer for the families. We have it kind of limited now, except for Friday, they come by for free vegetables.
Aren't there some local businesses that stepped up to help out, to volunteer time or resources?
It's unbelievable. Glenn Electric, he's unbelievable. Matt Glenn is unbelievable. He was like our Mother Teresa walking in the door to help us. He was such a great help. And
so glad.
Egan Landscaping, and they're unbelievable too.
I'm so glad you said that. I've known Matt Glenn from high school. We played football together.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he'll probably shoot me for saying this because his phone will ring with 10 other causes this afternoon.
Sure.
But, when we were building, I had nothing to do with it. When Debbie Grace in Kingston was building a playground for disabled children and or their disabled parents, you fail to realize that if you're disabled as a parent, you can't go onto the playground with your child. Therefore, the child never gets onto the playground.
Right.
So Debbie Grace and her team built a playground in Kingston that's designed for disabled children and their parents.
Wow.
And now you go down to that playground and you see disabled children playing on swings and slides and everything else that they could never take advantage of before. Excuse me. Or if there's a healthy child but a disabled parent, you're seeing a parent now enjoy that time with their children that they couldn't before. Debbie went to Matt Glenn.
Right.
And said, we need help wiring this thing up. And he said, done.
It doesn't
Done.
surprise me at all.
And he calls himself a Christian, and he calls himself a man of God. What I will tell you is, knowing Matt the way I know Matt, he lives that life every day. And the town of Plymouth is so fortunate to have a business and an individual who owns that business.
Absolutely.
That's been so good to the great causes that are around Plymouth. As you go into it, this is New England, so now the farm will shut down for the winter time. I know you'll still be working on it. What do you envision the next year or so? What will the farm do? What will it grow? What will the activity be like on the farm?
Well, right now we have we're putting together some different groups. So right now we're looking for more garden clubs. Mm-hmm. So right now we have the Pine Hills and the Great Island Estates garden clubs. They're going to take a piece of the farm. So
Very nice.
Different landscaping companies like Egan Landscaping, they're taking a piece of the farm. So it'll be maintained by that different group. So when the veteran goes there, it's kind of a Disney World of flowers. It's not just a farm, but it's just a beautiful place. George Egan put in a 180-foot paved walkway for veterans in wheelchairs and walkers. We're adding another 80 feet to it. And we're putting in a blueberry grove. We're putting in a tomato vine grove. We're building a wedding arbor. It just goes on and on. I just couldn't, it would take me a half hour to.
Chris, I'd love to introduce you
Such
to
a
the
beautiful place.
Kingston Garden Club. I went to a breakfast with that group a couple of weeks ago at the Bradford House, and it's 30 or 40 50 people, mostly women, who do an incredible job around Kingston, beautifying through flowers.
It's great.
Key parts of the town. And I know that many of them are either married to or have family members who have served. And I bet you, I can't speak for them, but I'll bet you they'd love to be involved.
Oh, we'd love to meet them. I mean, you know, you have veterans that were trained to take life. Now you're going to train them to give life.
Right.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you know, no matter what people tell you about Make America Great Again, it was never not great. I've never seen so much patriotism in my whole life. I grew up in Boston. I'm half Penn Dutch, so I'm down in Pennsylvania a couple times a year, and I've never seen so many flags, bumper stickers, bike rides for veterans, and motorcycle runs for veterans, and people are doing push-ups all over the place for veterans. I've never seen so much support for veterans in my lifetime.
You know, I'm so happy to hear you say that. We're filming this on August 17th, so it's you know, about 2 months, 2.5 months before the presidential election. And my hope, quite honestly, my prayer is that over the next 2.5 months, people begin to understand what you just said. You know, we as a country have our problems. You know, you can't have a group of 5 in this world without there being problems in the group.
Sure.
So when you think of a group of 350 million Americans, there are going to be problems. There are challenges. There's no question no question at all. That's a way of life in any form of government, even in the greatest form of government, democracy. But at the end of the day, we've always worked out those issues. We've always maintained our American values, our
Right.
American standards. And what really bothers me about this presidential election, and it doesn't matter who you support or who you oppose, is I think the level of dialogue that's gone on has dragged us down as a country. And what I'm most concerned about is that our children, and I've said this for years, our children are listening. And this type of vitriol is being imprinted on their brains.
Right.
And I would say that anybody that runs for public office should understand his or her foremost obligation to lead. And to me, leadership is about competency. Leadership is about honesty. It's about vision. And it's about the capacity to inspire others. Nowhere in that definition of leadership is the need to tear someone down or to tap into people's fear. Yeah, we have issues, and we need to deal with our issues. But I would say to both candidates, or I guess all 3 candidates in the presidential race, the Libertarian as well, try to have vision and try to inspire and stop tearing people down. And I loved what you just said about the way we treat veterans. Massachusetts has got the richest veterans package in the country. We've passed the Valor Act.
Right.
We passed another bill 3 months ago regarding property taxes and excise taxes. If there's a benefit that's given to a veteran anywhere in this country, it's given to veterans in Massachusetts.
Sure.
I'm so proud, I'm so pleased. In Massachusetts, I mean, Nathan Hale Foundation receives not a contribution, a subsidy from the state government to do what you do.
NathanHaleFoundation.org or the Nathan Hale Veterans Outreach Centers.org or the Nathan Hale Veterans Wellness Centers.org or 3 Hearts Farm. Or you can find us on Facebook, 3 Hearts Farm with it, no E in Hearts, it's my last name. And Nathan Hale Veterans Wellness Centers in Middleborough, the Nathan Hale Veterans Wellness Center, Nathan Hale Veterans Outreach Center, and Nathan Hale Veterans Outreach Centers, Plymouth, Middleborough. And anyone could find me.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Chris, for joining us. I'm so proud to know you, and I'm so grateful for the work you do. And to the folks out there, enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll see you in the fall.